Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll tell you what, I know that there are so many different ways for us to grow our businesses, so many ways for us to market our businesses, but the problem is, if you log into social media, you will be convinced that there's only one way. You need to be on social media, you need to be running ads, all of these things people want to lead you to believe are true. But today, we have went out and sought after one of the best in a very different marketing channel that way too many people forget about, which is weird because all of us as customers and consumers have seen this form of marketing and advertising in effect, and we see it every single time we leave our houses. So let me tell you all about today's guest because she is someone who's brilliant, she's creative, and she really understands marketing in a really powerful way that we can all use to benefit our own businesses. So her name is Heather Waisanen. She's the founder of Coastal Maverick, which is a boutique out-of-home consulting company. Heather has a wealth of experience spanning the vendor, client, and agency sides, and she's cultivated a profound passion for out-of-home advertising. If this is the first time that you're hearing this term, then you're in for a real treat learning from Heather directly here today. Throughout her career, she's had the privilege of working with a diverse range of brands, each with its unique story and vision. Her role has always been to amplify these narratives through strategic out-of-home placements, ensuring maximum visibility and engagement. I'm personally super excited about this one, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Heather Waisanen. All right, Heather, I'm so very excited and grateful that you're here with us today. So first things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Heck yes, especially I will say, not to put pressure on you, but you are the one who's introducing our audience to a lot of these concepts that we're talking about today. So before we get to all of that, take us beyond the bio. Who's Heather? How the heck did you start doing all these cool things that you get up to?
Yes. So I feel like a lot of people, you just fall into certain industries that you never planned to fall into. And for me, I started working at an advertising agency, and I was on the traditional side with TV and radio. And that kind of really introduced me to the, traditional media side of things, and ended up getting poached and worked at Outfront Media, which is one of the really large vendors. If you are, driving down the road and you see billboards on the side of the road, you'll see some of the big names like Outfront Media, Lamar, Clear Channel. A lot of these are the billboard companies that I work directly with. And so I spent some time working with Outfront Media, really understanding, what happens on the vendor side. And I was client facing there as well. So I got to see, the contracts coming in, the questions clients had, really got to work, one-on-one with them, and get a really good understanding of the out-of-home industry from that perspective. Fast forward a little bit, poaching seemed to be the name of the game for a little while for me. And I was poached by a client, and ended up going over to the client side, working on their in-house marketing team, overseeing their out-of-home in the Southeast region for a handful of years. And this was, managing billboards, bus wraps, different things like that. So that really gave me the strength and the ability to do media planning, media buying across, I want to say at the end of my time at this company, it was around 15 markets. So really managing every piece of it, every vendor contract, and doing all the negotiations as well on behalf of the company. So that gave me a really great perspective from that side of what it's like to actually buy, an out-of-home campaign from the client perspective. And then I ended up going to an out-of-home agency for a little while. And that was, that one really gave me the ability to do media planning on a national scale. So I got to work with brands across the US that wanted to do multi-market buys. So, if somebody wanted to do a campaign in, some of the big markets, Miami, Dallas, and LA, I could put together a plan for them based on their target audience, what they were trying to accomplish, Yeah. And then I guess fast forward from there is I was part of a layoff, and a lot of people say, unfortunately, I was part of a layoff. And I say fortunately, because I'd always had a side hustle. I'd always dreamed of having my own business. I just never knew what that might be, how I would do that. And once I had the layoff, I was like, I think this is my time to give it a shot. I've been on, the vendor side, the client side, and agency side, and I feel like I could bring a unique perspective, to the out-of-home industry, to clients, and that's what happened. So I, officially launched my company, full force earlier this year. So I'm still new to the game of being, an entrepreneur and everything that entails, which is many, many hats. But that is, the journey that got me to where I am right now.
Yes, I love that overview, especially because you talk about being a newer entrepreneur, but we're going to have a conversation towards the end of today's episode with our entrepreneurial hats on, not necessarily just talking about the subject matter expertise that you have, which obviously you are not new to. You are no stranger to the out-of-home advertising space. And really hearing that overview, it immediately strikes us that we've seen out-of-home advertising everywhere. You so effortlessly rattled off billboards, bus wraps. There's so many different ways that it shows up. Why is it not part of the traditional marketing mix these days? Everybody gets honed in on the same sort of marketing channels. What's different about out-of-home, and why are we not tapping into it more?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I really truly think people are starting to come back to it. It's one of the traditional formats that is still relevant. TV and radio you're kind of falling off. There's streaming and there's podcasts and there's, streaming services for audio. So, billboards and out of home, while it's still considered a traditional format, it still can be relevant. It's still new in certain ways. There's, there's digital capabilities. You could run a 15-second video ad on an out-of-home format, and you could take that same video and repurpose that, into some sort of social media content. So, I do tell clients, be omnipresent, be across multiple channels, but I think people are noticing out of home more. And also we're on our phones, we're on our computers, we're looking at screens so much. I don't look at my phone usage anymore because it was really scary to see that number. But I think people are really, they call it the digital burnout, and people are really starting to just see things outside again because we're looking up from our phones, and in some other markets, like where I live currently, we have a lot of your traditional billboards and bus benches and bus shelters. But in other markets, there's a lot of really cool formats that people wouldn't think of. There's like hand-painted murals, so you could really take a brand and make it into a piece of art. And so I do think people are coming back to recognizing the value of out of home, getting creative with it, thinking outside the box. How do I actually grab my target audience's attention? Like, what can I do that's going to make them stop, look at my billboard, look at, the wallscape, look at the airport advertisement, whatever it may be. I think people are really getting more creative, and out of home, I think is here to stay for a while.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's something that I've for sure noticed. In so many ways, we're going back to the old school formats. And I, as someone who I don't like being on my phone, I so appreciate the fact that we are moving more and more societally in that direction. I want to call out, I don't want it to get lost in today's conversation. You just made a really powerful point in strategy, which is we can also repurpose our out-of-home efforts onto the digital channels that we use. I'm thinking, you use the example of a 15-second video ad. I've seen quite a few people who spend, I think it's like $200 to be on a Times Square billboard. They get a picture of themselves in front of it, and they then use that across their social media channels. What a cool way to capture attention. So I really appreciate those insights, Heather. I want to ask you about the process, because for a lot of people, it's their first glimpse into the possibilities. Probably they don't even realize how accessible it truly is. When we talk about that Times Square opportunity, it's accessible to pretty much everybody. So Heather, what's the process? We know what it's like to launch a Facebook ad campaign and create something in Canva and the copy. What does it look like to put together an out-of-home campaign?
Yes. So for me, step one is talking to the client. What are your pain points? What are your objectives? What are you trying to accomplish with, your billboard campaign? And, there's a lot that goes into it too. What markets do you want to be in, things like that. But being in the industry for a while now, I do have a lot of connections, a lot of relationships that I've built over the years with my media partners. And really, it could go two ways. I could have a client that wants to be really hands-on and wants to be, a lot more part of the process of, here's a handful of recommendations. Let's work through this, strategy together. But also, there could be clients that come through and they say, hey, you know what? Here's who I'm trying to target. Here's the markets. Here's my budget. And I would love for you to build, your media plan for me across these markets. And let's look at your recommendation. And then we lock it in. So honestly, it's, getting, I guess, down to the kind of nitty gritty process piece is once you have those, key things, budget, markets, target audience, sometimes, I do ask the client, hey, what formats are you looking at? Do you just want to do billboards? Do you just want to do digital? And even if they tell me just that, I always include some unique, out of the box formats just to kind of get their, brain, getting the wheels turning a little bit of there are some cool ideas that you could add on to your billboard campaign. So, I usually will take everything that they've given me. I go to my reps. I tell them exactly what I'm looking for. They send me over anything that's available. And then I really go through it and, based on what the client's looking for, I go through and cherry pick, the billboards that I think are going to reach their audience. I pick, maybe a bus route that's going to, go through a neighborhood that, this person is trying to reach, whatever it may be. I really go through and look at the strategy, look at everything from, a bird's eye. Does this cover everything they're looking for? But also really getting, down to the details of making sure I'm hitting every target audience, especially if it's a multi-market campaign, there could be very different audiences in different markets. So I, cherry pick for my clients and then I present the plan to them. And then honestly, I do the negotiating on behalf of the client. I can help them with creative resources if they need that. But I really try to take away, the steps that you said that could be daunting to somebody. I try to take that away from them. They don't need to go to every single, vendor that's out there to get quotes and to figure out how to run a campaign when, I could really walk them through that process. I can help with the negotiating, the creative, and, making sure their campaign starts on time. And also we, always do like a proof of performance post photo to make sure that everything went live when it was supposed to. And that's something I make sure my clients get, making sure they get good quality photos of their campaign, because then again, like you said, they can repurpose this on their social media. So if it's their first time running a billboard campaign, or let's say they did, a billboard campaign with taxi toppers and a bus shelter, and I make sure they get photos of every single piece of inventory, and then they have access to that. They can post it. They can do whatever they want with it. But I do want to make sure they get those to have for, social media, whatever they want to do with it. But I do from beginning to end, pre-contracting to post-contracting, I'm there with them every step of the way. I like to educate clients on, the best ways to use out of home. And I will, always tell a client if they're like, hey, we saw somebody do this and we'd love to do it too. Sometimes some formats I don't recommend for a client. It isn't the right fit, but I will always come in and tell them, hey, I think you should use this and here's why. So that's usually my process there. That was a little long-winded, but hopefully that all makes sense.
No, it's great, Heather, because it is really fun hearing you talk about these things, because I feel like it is the marriage of traditional marketing principles. You went straight to the, who the heck do you want to reach with your campaign? Let's really get in on the customer avatar that we talk about so much in marketing. But then it is those specific nuances that have to do with out-of-home considerations. And one of which is obviously the visuals. I want to ask you about that, because I'm just thinking about when I drive down the road, I see a lot of things. And especially when I lived in Los Angeles, gosh, I feel like there's a billboard every 2 feet, and one is for a movie, one is for a TV show, one is for a hip new product. There's so many things that we see when we're out and about in the world, which leads me to ask you, What are those specific considerations with regards to visuals? And also I want to introduce, as part of this question, what's the frequency? Because we're on the move when we see these things, do we have to vary it in multiple locations? Do we have to run these campaigns for longer amounts of time? I'd love to hear some of those insights.
Yes. So we'll start with, the creative process. So I am not a graphic designer. I don't claim to be. I have some really great creative partners that I will always bring in for any kind of creative, consult with a client if that's what they need. But guiding them in the creative process, you don't want to just do what everybody else is doing. You do need something that's going to grab attention. You don't want a lot of text on the billboard. Like you said, people are driving. You don't want a QR code when you're driving down a highway. Nobody's going to scan it. And we're not recommending that. And the same with the text. It's, our attention span has just continued to drop. So you need to have 8 words or less, as minimal words as possible on the billboard to really, convey what you're trying to say in a short amount of time, because you'd only have, such a short amount of time for somebody to actually see your billboard when they're driving by. So, the creative needs to, especially with colors as well, you need your colors to stand out. You need less than 8 words, on the board itself, nothing that's going to distract the driver from the driving. Like I said, like a QR code on a highway. There is a place for it, but not on a highway billboard. And as far as, frequency goes, I don't ever recommend a client to run less than 8 weeks, because if you're really trying to build like a brand awareness campaign, if they don't see you up for a longer period of time, they're not going to have that brand recall that they would if you were running for a longer period of time. So, out of home really, especially for brand awareness campaigns, they've never done out of home before, put up, multiple billboards in your target areas, wherever that may be, and, try some different formats too. One thing that's great about out of home now is, if you're trying to reach an audience in a specific neighborhood and there are no billboards, they have mobile billboards now. And you can have custom routed billboards targeting these specific, areas. So if you're trying to reach that neighborhood and you have mobile billboards that are coming through, and then that same person is driving to work and then they see your billboard on the highway, there tends to get that brand recognition that happens. So I definitely recommend multiple placements, multiple formats, and running at least 8 weeks, to really build, that recognition with customers.
Yeah, really great and valuable insights there. When I hear 8 words or less, Heather, how the heck are we going to be that concise in 8 words or less? But when I think about some of the greatest marketing campaigns of our lifetime, I immediately think of Got Milk. We saw those Got Milk ads literally everywhere. I was a kid and I still remember seeing them, and I can still picture their ad creatives and all of that. So yeah, there is still a lot of room for creativity, and actually forces us to be succinct and really think about what it is that we want to convey in that, which leads me to ask you about the goal of these campaigns. You talk about brand recognition. Obviously, that's one way that we can target for, and that's one way we can measure the success of these campaigns. Is this a great top of funnel? Do we look to close sales with out of home? Where do you view that as part of the funnel from top to bottom?
Yes, no, this is a great question. So I've definitely built media plans for clients that truly show them formats that are top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of the funnel. And, I think you can use it for all three, depending on, what your overall objective is. There's the brand awareness we talked about. It's just really getting your brand out there. You want people to know who you are. Maybe you don't really have a call to action for them yet. But there's other formats that do, really allow a consumer to engage. So, in New York, they have a lot of these digital kiosks that are on, sidewalks. They're pedestrian visibility, and they also have vehicle visibility. So you're getting both, travelers by car and by foot on some of these kiosks. And if you have, if you're trying, let's just, for an example, say you're a store in New York and you have a sale coming up for Black Friday, and your store is within, a couple blocks of this digital screen, and you have a QR code that says, scan here, come in, and it offers the customer some sort of discount, if they come into the store from that specific QR code. So it definitely can drive traffic into stores. Another example for you is a campaign I recently did is for a restaurant. And it was a multi-market campaign, and they were really looking to drive foot traffic. And what was great about this one is we strategically looked for billboards within 1 mile or less of their store, but also their competitors. So, we really had to get strategic here because we wanted to find the billboards that were placed in a perfect position to where we could say, exit half a mile for blank, whatever your tagline might be for your restaurant or your store, and really pushing that, in-store foot traffic. So you can really use it from, like I said, top of funnel brand awareness. You can have, customers really engage directly with your ad, have them, walk right into the store. So I think you can use it, all the way from top to bottom.
Yeah, I really love that. And the fact that you have such a deep understanding of marketing shows that we're not just putting together cool visuals that's going to catch people's eyes. There are marketing fundamentals and principles that you are strategizing for your clients. So I really appreciate these insights. You brought up QR codes a few times, so I've got to ask the question, QR codes, are they worth it or not? What sort of calls to action? Can we drop our website URLs? How can we navigate that so people actually know where to go from seeing our ads?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be a debatable question. So some people may agree with me and some people may not, but that's the joy of, being in marketing. We don't always agree on certain things. But, I think they have a time and a place, honestly. I think, if you are giving something away, if you have like an enter to win, whatever it may be, I think a QR code has its place if it's on the right format. Again, like I said, you don't want a QR code on a highway billboard. That does not make sense. That is not safe, and no one's going to be able to actually scan that QR code. So, these formats that are, within, walking distance, if they're pedestrian visible, and you're on the sidewalk, you see it, the ad catches your eye, scan here for a discount. Or, if it's a restaurant, it's scan here and, get a free appetizer. That might be somebody who's visiting a city and they're like, oh, this restaurant's around the corner. I can get a free appetizer if I scan this QR code. Great. I'm going to go in and check this out. So I think they are relevant when they're used correctly. I don't think they're, meant to be across every out-of-home campaign by any means, but I think the right time, the right place, they are a good fit.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll actually argue that I think COVID was good for the QR code industry because I think we all learned with our phone cameras how to scan a QR code to access that digital menu. So for sure, a lot of ways for us to improve the usage and adoption of those. And it's really cool to hear some real life examples from you. With that said, I'm sure you get this question all the time, and it's always the most difficult question to answer because there's no one size fits all. And that is, of course, the price. Heather, I'm sure people always ask you, how much does it cost to have a billboard or all the other? You've given us so many real life examples of different formats. Walk us through at least the price ranges so people have a clue as to what's accessible and what's not.
Yes, no, that is actually a big, kind of pushback that I actually get when I'm, talking with people, especially on I really want to work with local businesses and really help them, push their business. But, they come in with a smaller budget, but anybody can do out of home. I think I have been able to work with budgets under 5K and then, upwards of that. So I think, again, it comes back to strategy. It comes back to being really strategic with the budget you do have and the market you're in, because every market's going to be different. What something costs in New York and LA is going to be very different than my local market in Florida and, billboards maybe in Kentucky, so they're going to range. And I think they range by format as well. So static billboards, have production costs involved because they're printed on a vinyl material, and, digital billboards, they don't have that production cost that is on top. And a perk with digital is you get to actually change your creative, and you don't have to, pay to swap out a vinyl every time you want to change your creative. So I know that's still kind of vague there, but I do, I tell clients I can normally work with any budget, and, as low as, 5K, a little below that it gets tricky, but if you're strategic and you have the right partners and you work with the client, you can make something happen. But again, if you want to expand that budget as well and go all in and do, 3 massive markets and hand painted murals and bus wraps and everything else, it does come at a price point. But I tell every brand, hey, anybody could run an out-of-home campaign.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective because I know how hard it is to answer that question, but it does give us those guidelines for people to know what sort of arena they can play in. And I think that price point shows that for any business that has that predictable, especially the one metric that I always look at as lifetime customer value, if you analyze 5K and the average customer is going to be worth X amount of dollars to you, it's so much easier to pull that trigger and make that decision. So I really appreciate those insights. I want to ask you this, Heather, because I live here in downtown Tampa, and every time I walk around, I always pay attention to what looks like guerrilla marketing style tactics, but I wonder how much of it is actually intentional. For example, Sabrina Carpenter, who I don't know anything that she does or what she's famous for, but her ads, if you will, are all over our sidewalks right now. It looks like a stamp. It looks like guerrilla style marketing that someone has essentially just stamped all over our sidewalks. Give us some examples, because now talking to you, I'm realizing there's probably a smart strategist like you behind that campaign. What are some of those out of the box real life examples?
So that's actually one of them. Sidewalk chalk. Chalk stencils are out of home. So, if, downtown Tampa, it's funny you say that because that's a hard market with out of home because there's very limited inventory in the space. So you do have to get creative in markets where there aren't billboards or there aren't, digital kiosks. So how else can you grab someone's attention? You could have, they have these mobile trucks now that have sight, sound, and motion. So imagine, a truck with sound and lights driving down through downtown Tampa, that's going to capture somebody's attention. Maybe they couldn't get a billboard near, the restaurant or whatever it is they're trying to promote, but they actually were able to take, their own billboard and put it on wheels and have it drive through the area they were looking to target. So yeah, there's chalk stencils. We all know about blimps, aerial banners. Those are all considered out-of-home formats. Let me think. You put me on the spot, so my brain is like, what are some other cool ideas?
My head also... Sorry, I was just going to say, my head also goes, every time I'm in Miami, I see the boats actually driving around with mobile billboards now.
Digital boats now in a few markets, and the digital boats, they get some slack from some people, but they are a great way to capture attention. I've seen a lot of great campaigns run on the digital boats. So yeah, digital boats, there's even things now where, there's like ferries and you can, deck out a ferry. And then with the hand painted murals I mentioned, they also have a scent capability now. So if you have a product that you're like, especially coming into fall, it's pumpkin spice latte season, although I don't drink them. If pumpkin is your season and you have this great product that smells amazing, you could have, an out-of-home campaign that also has a scent now. So that is something that is new. It's different, out of the box a little bit. Like, hey, do you want to run an out-of-home campaign that also has smell? Now you can. And we can also do, chalk stencils on the way to it. So yes, there's a lot of just new fun ideas, and there's 3D digital capabilities now. I really feel like the options are endless. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to do something completely out of the box, a lot of times I'll go to my media partners and just say, hey, help me with this, help me build this out for the client and really stand out. Let's put our heads together and go across multiple formats and create something unique and different.
Yeah, gosh, I always tell people I have the coolest job in the world, but Heather, the longer you and I talk, I'm starting to think you probably feel the same way about what you do as well, because the sky really is the limit. And actually in your industry, the sky is not the limit because you can do anything and everything, including in the sky. So, gosh, I could ask you a million questions about out of home, but in these episodes, I always love transitioning and talking to you entrepreneur to entrepreneur. And one thing that really stands out about you, I know that you were a competitive gymnast growing up, and I'll share with you one analogy that I always use. I'm not a gymnast and I'm also not a skateboarder, but living in LA, when I went to the Venice Beach skate park, one thing that I would always admire is that you cannot get better at skateboarding unless you fall. It is inevitable. If you want to learn a new skill, you have to fall. And the same is true, obviously, when it comes to gymnastics. Heather, give us some of those parallels and analogies, because you say that you're a newer entrepreneur, but obviously you've got the persistence and resilience that comes along with everything you've done in life. So how has that side of the entrepreneurial transition been for you?
Yes, I think, entrepreneurship can be scary. Everyone's, I can be I'm a planner by nature and a planner by trade. And I was waiting for like the blueprint of here's what you're supposed to do when you start a business. Like, here's how to do it. Here's step 1 and step 2. And I realized after listening to, a lot of other podcasts and a lot of people just talking about, you just have to start. And I was like, okay, but what does that mean? And finally I was like, I'm just going to start this thing and figure it out. And, you think, I'll tell a couple people I started a business. I'll put a website up and business is going to start flowing. And, unfortunately that is not how how it works. And, I really feel like every no is just, the next, your next yes is on the way. You have to get through so many no's. You have to get through so many, conversations with clients that are, you do a lot of strategy sessions and a lot of planning sessions, and then you get a no, and you have to keep going. You can't just like throw in the towel because somebody you were really excited to build a campaign for said, oh, the budget got shifted, or, oh, we're going a different direction. You can't just stop what you're doing because of one, no. And for me, it's just continuing to grow. It's, every no I've had, every email that I've not received a response from, I'm like, that's okay. We'll get them the next time. And, also I think just to kind of keep that momentum going is expanding my network, is, joining local organizations, meeting people in your city or nationally, whatever it may be. But, I think building those relationships has helped me get closer to the yeses now. So, I've had a lot of no's. I've, made a handful of mistakes, in my, first year of entrepreneurship, of just not knowing what to do, not knowing, how to do something, but just, asking for help, asking somebody who's already done it, or another entrepreneur, hey, give me some tips. How did you navigate this? How did you navigate that? And, take all of that and just keep moving forward, because I think, the yeses will come, the clients will come, all of it will come, but you do have to stay persistent. You have to get up every single day for yourself, and you just have to keep pushing forward.
Yes, an essential mindset, and one that I don't think we talk about enough in the world of business and entrepreneurship. I'm going to extrapolate it and just say life in general. I think it's such an important reminder for all of us. So, Heather, you've been a wealth of knowledge here today. I have no idea how you're going to top all of that or add on to all of that, because the last question that I love asking is, what's that one takeaway? Knowing that our listeners are at all different stages of their business growth journey, and some of them are paying for advertising and marketing already, but some of them are just going through a lot of the mindset stuff that we touched on here in today's episode as well. What's the one thing that you want to leave them with? What's that one takeaway or action that you hope every listener walks away from today's episode with?
Yes, it's a great way to end. Also a challenging one, but I think, like you said, mindset really truly is everything. And what you feed yourself, like physically, like food, to what you listen to, what you watch, all of that really does play a part in, your entrepreneurship journey. So for me, I always surround myself with like-minded people, other business owners, positive, podcasts, books, just anything that's going to keep me, on the journey and on the path to success that I want to be on, because, there can be a lot of negativity. Not everybody understands the entrepreneurship journey. And, I think you really have to surround yourself with the right people and make sure, everything you're telling yourself internally and what you're feeding yourself, it really does matter. And if you have any kind of inkling to start a business, or you are in that early stage, like, you just keep going. You're going to be successful. It's going to work, but it all does really start with your mindset. And if you think you can do it, you will. But if you wake up and you think, I don't think I'm going to make it today. You probably won't. So for me, the mindset piece is absolutely crucial. It's been, a big part of me just putting one foot in front of the other every single day. Especially in the first year when you do get all the no's, it's keeping yourself positive.
Yes, that's the real stuff right there, Heather. I so appreciate your insights there and how you chose to take that very broad question. It reminds me of two very important quotes that have always resonated with me. The first is from Henry Ford when he said, "Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right." And then the second one, gosh, this one just hit me hard in 2020 during the pandemic. And that is, ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. And Heather, you are such a shining example as to how disciplined and serious and intentional you are about what you let into your ecosystem, your environment, your mind. And I think it's been on full display here in today's episode. Obviously, you're brilliant at all the things that you do. So I'm excited for listeners to go deeper into the world of out-of-home advertising and to check out your website, because I'll say, even before you and I got together today, just scrolling through there and thinking about the possibilities, I think today's episode is going to open that door of possibilities for so many listeners. So drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
Yes. You can check out my website, coastalmaverick.com. And I'm big on LinkedIn. I always love to connect with everybody on LinkedIn. I think we can definitely drop that in the show notes, but you can always find me on LinkedIn. Heather Waisanen. Can also just search for me, Coastal Maverick, on LinkedIn. I always am on there. It's one of my favorite social media platforms. So would love to connect with anybody, even if you just have questions about out of home in general. Always open to have those conversations.
Yes. And as a podcast listener yourself, Heather, you did the hard part for me already. Those links are down below in the show notes. Listeners, you already know the drill. Wherever it is that you're tuning in, you can just click right on through. We're linking to Heather's business website, which is at coastalmaverick.com. You can click right through down below. And also we're linking to her personal LinkedIn. She loves this stuff. She was not prepped with any questions here today. And you see how effortlessly she puts together creative marketing campaigns on the fly. So listeners, don't be shy. Check out those links in the show notes. Otherwise, Heather, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.